Marvin Herndon is a scientist who does not play the money game with the federal government, doesn't take the government's money, and has the liberty of telling the truth in all of his scientific researches. He is 71 years old, a nuclear geophysicist, and has his most recent paper on the Torrey pine. And we're going to find out why the Torrey pine signifies a lot for you, our listener here on the David Tula Show at Nougat Radio. Dr. Herndon, you are a dissenter in the scientific world. You have published many papers in a wide variety of platforms and publications. And because you are a dissenter, you are free in a way to see things that other scientists just simply won't see. And tell my listener what perhaps the main thing that we're going to talk about today is that you've seen that others simply ignore or say is impossible to be true. What is it that you've reported on?
Well, let me go back a little bit further than that. In 1979, I realized that the inner core of the Earth, that's an object slightly smaller than the moon and about 3 times as massive at the center of the Earth, wasn't necessarily what people had thought for the 40 years that it had been known to exist. And so I published a paper in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of London suggesting a different idea. Nobel laureate Harold C. Urey communicated that paper. I got a very complimentary letter from Inga Lehman, the scientist who had discovered the inner core of the Earth. And I thought at that time, my gosh, there's going to be debate and discussion, and people with the big well-funded labs will take the idea and run with it, leave me in the dust. That didn't happen. It was as if the paper never got published. And then when my grants came up for renewal, they weren't renewed for no good reason. I had crossed a line. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what you don't do in the government-funded science community, you don't criticize work that the government funds or that the notable scientists who are funded, what they do. You just don't criticize it. You just make little additions to the storyline. Well, of course, what I did was turned it upside down, and that was intolerable. So I was faced with a choice. What do I do? Well, you can't do science, real science, and not tell the truth. So I just decided to do science on my own dime, which is a part-time activity. But over 40 years, I've made incredible discoveries. Meanwhile, the science community has still been going on these old ideas from the 50s and 60s and 70s without changing them because nobody dares change them. And it's nice to re-understand or to understand in a new way how the world works, how maybe the universe works. But the real importance where people are concerned has to do with the discoveries I've made since about 2014, when I became concerned about the aerial spraying. I imagine that most of your listeners, if they look up in the sky, they'll see jet trails going across the sky, and these then spread out, and for a while will look like cirrus clouds before they spread out even more and become a white haze. I mean, this has been going on since, in a big way, since maybe 2010 or so, and worldwide, virtually all countries. And I became concerned because I know that these are small particles, and small particles are what you have in one form of pollution. And there have been a lot of studies done about the health effects of pollution, a lot of epidemiological studies. And my God, it's frightening. So I started making experiments and figuring out what it is that they're spraying and why it's damaging to health. And I began to collaborate with a public health physician in the state of Florida. And we published 3 papers in the medical literature about the risks to humans for lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder and respiratory disease, and neurodegenerative disease. I mean, this stuff is terrible. Well, we just had a paper just published last few days that is about another problem of the spraying. And we use the Torrey pines in San Diego as the place to study it. Torrey pines is one of the rare endangered species of pines that only occur in San Diego and on an island, on a slightly different variety, on an island a little north of San Diego. But these things have been dying. And we began to understand that it's the spraying that is the overall cause. It's causing the trees to be weakened. And that poisons the moisture, the fog. The water extracts poisons from these particles that is being sprayed. Then it condenses on the needles of the pine trees, and it drips down to the roots. But before it does that, some of it evaporates off of the needles, and so in fact it concentrates the poison. One of them is aluminum in a chemically mobile form, which is poisonous to most species. And this then drips down to the roots and poisons the trees. Well, it's not just these rare Torrey pines in San Diego. It's trees throughout the country, throughout the world, throughout Canada, throughout Spain, in Africa. There's a global forest die-off. And we have been able to link that to the aerial spraying. And this is terrible. I mean, it's one thing that the aerial spraying does terrible things to human health. I mean, heaven forbid. I mean, maybe you could ignore that. But when it damages our forests and will inevitably decimate the timber industry, and then it damages the agricultural interest as well because it poisons the soil. And another paper we have coming out soon that hasn't quite been published yet has to do with the effect on insects and bees. It kills insects and it kills bees. And bees, I mean, you know, they're nice to have around, but they're an important necessity for pollinating crops. I mean, this is so they're damaging agriculture as well. I mean, this is a monstrous thing that's going on, and it's global.
Now, in your paper, Dr. Herndon, in your paper about the Torrey pines, you say that the particles which are deposited by these jets, evidently in the interest of climate engineering and geoengineering, they themselves come into the plant and weaken the plant to insects. But you also say in this paper that the coal fly ash aerosolized injection or injections plural contain ozone killing chlorine that affect the ozone
the shield that protects us from the sun's ultraviolet radiation.
Right. Okay. Well, say something about that. How back to the pine tree, since we care maybe more about the environment than we do for human health. How does the ultraviolet ray damage the plant, the tree life there in these two places of the Torrey pine?
Well, it damages the leaves, and obviously causes chemical reactions within the leaves. And I mean, you expose a plant to ultraviolet radiation, and it will become unhealthy first, and eventually the leaves will wither and it'll die. So this is one way that the damage is occurring, and of course the NASA, that is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is much connected with the measurements of ozone and so forth. And this is one agency that is totally in the tank. They were at the very beginning of the whole global warming scam. They were major participants. And so you can't believe that they're going to be telling the truth. In fact, a NASA investigator back in, I want to say 2004, I think that was the year, published a paper about ultraviolet C, which is the most deadly type, being measured on Earth. And he was an employee of NASA, and so were at least one of his colleagues. And instead of NASA saying, hey, we've got to find out what's going on here, this is serious, they simply ignored it. They did nothing. And that's so you have an agency that doesn't want to talk about what's being done harmful to the planet. They want to talk about the political aspects of getting a lot of money for getting into this global warming scam.
Well, now in 2000, in May, Dr. Herndon, in May of 2018, well, this year, you have another paper I wanted just to you to dwell on just for a minute. What do you and Mark Whiteside say? Your title is Aerosolized Coal Fly Ash, Risk Factor for COPD and Respiratory Disease. So what is COPD, and how does our intentionally polluted air affect people who have that condition?
Oh, it's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That's what that stands for. And it's the toxins in the air, the pollution particles. This is deliberate pollution with aerosolized coal fly ash, which is very toxic stuff. But it's deliberate pollution. People who are sensitive to where breathing is concerned, people, for example, with asthma, are badly affected by pollution in the air. This exacerbates any problems that people have. It causes irritation in the lungs. It's not at all healthy. And parallel to that is the paper that we did on the lung cancer. The coal fly ash contains a number of different chemicals and radioactive elements that have been shown to cause lung cancer. For example, arsenic, or for example, chromium-6, 6-valent chromium. And it contains radioactive elements. And you know, when they decay, their charged particles do damage that very often leads to cancer. And these are fine particles, some of them even in the nano range, which can enter the body and even not even through breathing, through the nasal passages or even through the eyes. And all of this is being ignored. This is like this. There's an agenda to do this spraying. And it becomes of interest then to ask how that agenda started or why it started. If you like, I'd go there.
This is David Tillis, and we're talking with Dr. Marvin Herndon. He is a nuclear geophysicist in San Diego, and we're hearing about how he is explaining why the Torrey pine, an endangered pine species not found in many places at all, is on the way out because of aerosolized geoengineering particles, which are absorbed by the plant, which is weakened, making it susceptible to bugs and decay. And Dr. Herndon, you are I've been writing about this problem in the context of Chattanooga and Hamilton County, Tennessee, since about 2014, and you broke the story. And if I'm remembering right, it's 2015 when I first found your work, and you were saying that the content, the material that these jets are depositing, no doubt in the millions of tons over the years, is coal fly ash. Now, we had here in the area in local press stories about the Tennessee Valley Authority coal fly ash dumps, which are ponds. The utility turns this dust into mud so that it won't go aloft. These particles are so light that they'll fly away on the slightest breeze, and so they have to be turned into mud and kept in clay-lined pits. And there's litigation litigation in progress about how whether people have been workers have been damaged by that by coal fly ash. So, however, I say that, however, coal fly ash is not a toxic waste, right? It's not classified by the EPA as a toxic waste. So theoretically, one could say it could be distributed through the air passages of the sky, right?
Oh, there's an interesting story about this. Most people believed that the EPA, when it issued its final rulings in 2014, I think it was January of 2014, would rule this as toxic waste. But instead they ruled it as solid waste. And I think the reason is because they're not going to rule something as toxic waste that they're spraying into the air we breathe. But by ruling it as solid waste, it means that it can be dumped into landfills or dumped into rivers, get into our water supply. It also means that the U.S. can become a dumping ground for foreign coal fly ash. Now, this has happened at least one time so far. A shipment of coal fly ash was brought into the United States to be dumped into some facility that someone had a license to dump it. But by virtue of its being classified as solid waste, the U.S. could become the world's dumping ground for this toxic material. And make no mistake, it is toxic. I mean, it's a toxic nightmare.
On the other hand, Dr. Herndon, on the other hand, one could let my listeners see the other side of the story. Okay, the feds, in the interest of national security and weather modification and weather control, the weaponization of weather, they have reason to want coal fly ash, and this is what your initial research that I read made very, very clear, that the particles are very small, they're very light, they're like talcum powder, and so they stay aloft, right? And what theoretically is the reason that they would want this cloud cover? What theoretically, at least, is the rationale?
Well, the coal fly ash is an ideal substance for the military to use if ideal doesn't include harm to human health or harm to the environment. Coal fly ash forms naturally as very fine particles, so they don't have to manufacture it. It's a waste product, so it's very, very low cost. Now, when it's sprayed into the air, it does several things. One thing it does, and this is of great interest to the military, is it prevents the little tiny droplets of water from getting together and coalescing and becoming massive enough to fall as rain. So it inhibits the fall of rain. Well, hey, that's a great asset to the military if they want to prevent or use it surreptitiously to cause some country to have droughts and to ruin their agriculture. And there are allegations that this has, in fact, been done. But it does other things. The moisture reacts with the coal fly ash and extracts elements into the water. It extracts some aluminum, some barium, some strontium, some calcium, some iron, some magnesium, a whole slew of elements, which makes the little tiny raindrops or droplets of water more electrically conducting. Thus, they can use electromagnetic fields to move cloud masses around. So that's another purpose of it. But it also heats the atmosphere, which, if you heat the atmosphere, you increase the pressure. You heat it, it gets more pressure. And as you know, weather fronts are moved by differences in pressure.
This is David Tours, the Talk with Dr. Marvin Herndon. We'll be right back. David Tours, Nuga Radio.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A fire broke out at a home on Orchard Knob Avenue. Firefighters rushed into the scene, got the situation under control. However, 4 firefighters were treated for heat exhaustion by Hamilton County EMS. The damage to the home estimated at $20,000. The CDC sending out a warning to the state of Tennessee about the dangers of Rocky Mountain spotted fever, a tick-borne illness. RMSF can be fatal if left untreated. Symptoms start with a rash, fever, nausea, and eventually develop into gangrene. The CDC says it's paramount that victims of tick bites monitor their health closely to ensure they don't exhibit symptoms. And new details after a pedestrian was killed. A woman was hit by a car early yesterday morning. Chattanooga police say 64-year-old Richard Fearson swerved to try to avoid the woman, but it was too late. The driver will not be charged. Val St. John for Nuga Radio. News Talk 92.7. Action News now.
Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7 Action Sports. Now, the 2018 Prep Football Jamboree will be kicking off Friday evening at 5:30 p.m. with 9 quarters on tap. Saturday night's action is set to include 11 matchups and is set to kick off at 4:30 p.m. All action will take place at Finley Stadium in downtown Chattanooga. Season begins the next week on Thursday, August 16th at Finley Stadium with the Erlanger Kickoff Classic, Baylor versus Notre Dame, which that game there you can listen to live here on Nuga Radio 92.7 FM. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency is seeking fields to lease for the upcoming 2018 dove season. The first segment of dove season opens at noon on Saturday, September 1st. Mourning doves are a popular game bird and one of the most widely distributed and abundant birds in North America. In Tennessee, an estimated 25,000 hunters harvested approximately 408,500 mourning doves last year. Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7 Action Sports now.
Nuga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Hello? Who am I speaking with?
Eric.
You're our winner.
Really?
You'll receive tickets for all 3 races between the Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Monster Energy Cup races.
Holy cow.
In addition, you'll receive a 2-night stay at the Microtel Hotel and restaurant accommodations at 2 area restaurants.
Nuga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Nuga Radio.